Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. I'll give everyone a second to join us before we dive into conversation with our guest, Rayshauna. But I want to thank everyone for joining me. My name's Jen Walker-Wall. So if you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining. And if you're watching and you've seen these before, I'm thrilled to have you back. It's been a hot minute since I've been on here, taking a little bit of a baby sabbatical. And so I'm glad to be back and excited to have a guest with me today. I wanted to start before we dive into kind of the interview and conversation with Rayshauna. I wanted to share a little bit about why we're hosting these conversations and sort of what the intention is behind having these conversations all summer long. So this is the kickoff event for our Reimagining Ambition series. And today is June 1st, which means it's also the 8-year anniversary of Work Wonders Careers. So it's like a little anniversary birthday of this little side hustle that's now like my full-time and only job. And I was thinking back 8 years ago about what this work looked like then and what it looks and feels like today. And so if you're familiar with our work, if you've come to our workshops or live streams before, we get really in the weeds. I have a hiring and HR background. And so we really work on helping people make a lot of tactical changes to navigate, a career change or a job change. The last year has been the busiest it's ever been. And I've seen some new trends and themes emerging. And I think it's safe to say that work and life here in the US has taken on some new meaning for a lot of us. We have been working through pandemic. My notes have pandemic in parentheses. We continue to be working through pandemics, mass layoffs, police violence and racism, political instability, mass shootings, gun violence. It seems to be a cascading series of events. And so I've been paying attention to the way that this has sort of manifested in people's attitudes and relationship to work and career, especially for folks who really identified strongly with their career, perhaps prior to 2020. And I've seen the cumulative effect of these events over the last few years and recognize that so many people are in a place where they're reevaluating their relationship to work. They're really examining their priorities. They have maybe not been treated well by their employer or by their industry, or they've watched other industries and how they've treated their employers, and it has them thinking about what's next for them. And so the goal of the Reimagining Ambition series is to have, honestly, people I really like. I'm going to call them guests and experts, but also they're my friends and some of my favorite people, to share their experience and expertise to help us hold space for these conversations and to provide us some tools for thinking about what's next. And so with that being said, I'm really super thrilled to have Rayshauna here today. If you want the full schedule of speakers, make sure you're on our mailing list. You can join at workwonderscareers.com/social. You can sign up right there and we'll send you the list. And if you know anyone who might benefit from a conversation like this, feel free to give this a share on whatever. If you're watching on LinkedIn, feel free to give this a share. But let me tell you about my friend Rayshauna. Rayshauna, as I was writing this and thinking about what I was going to say to you, I was like, where did I first find Rayshauna? And I have to say, I think we're Twitter friends. I think it started on Twitter and then moved into real life, even though we were both based in the Boston area at the time. So local Twitter. But I found you there and realized that you were doing some really incredible work around helping people understand how imposter syndrome was showing up for them in their life. And I've seen you on panels, and anytime people are having a conversation around imposter syndrome, I think you're like one of the most important voices to have. So you've spoken with us and many events I've seen. So I know the Heart Work framework and workshops are something that you have been doing probably for years now, right?
Oh yeah, I can't believe how many years. I think I'm coming up on 7 years. I think I originally laid out the bones of the framework back in 2015 for a Boston Glow workshop
Yes, Boston Glow.
with Dave Reeney.
I know.
7 years.
I know. Sorry about that. Sorry to throw that in there.
The pandemic has stolen our time.
It really has here. Rayshauna is an entrepreneur, writer, and policymaker. In addition to her Heartwork framework, she has made this Modus Operandi Deck. I pulled mine out here just so I could. This might be backwards, but I am such a huge fan of this. There's like really insightful questions on these cards, and I turn to this tool quite a bit, and I hope to talk about this today. She's also affiliated with Harvard Business School, History Cambridge, Boston Book Festival, and the Mass Cultural Council, and has strategized with early stage startups. I'm still processing my own age stuff. That's what's happening here. Created content for Boston's Museum of African American History, supported new initiatives at Harvard, and mapped 400 years of African American history as a member of the Tufts University Center for the Study of Race and Democracy. Rayshauna, did I miss anything? I mean, I know I missed some things. Did I miss anything super critical you want to share?
In the last month, I had a 3-article series, the Just Digital Future series, come out through Harvard Business School. It was a joint effort spearheaded by the Gender Initiative and the Digital Initiative over at HBS. And they interviewed 10 fascinating, accomplished people. And I wrote a 3-article synopsis on data, design, and diversity on teams. And so that's available. And then I was published, and that info about that book can be found on my website.
Wonderful. I love how varied your interests and skills are. Yeah, I always find you doing all kinds of things. And I'm always happy to follow you on Twitter and see what you're up to. But I would love to dive into the conversation. And I knew that I wanted to start with you because I feel like this deck is so appropriate for the kinds of questions people are asking, particularly, at this time after these experiences of the last few years. Do you want to share with us why you think self-reflection work is so critical as a practice?
For sure. I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me, and thank you for sharing with folks how you benefit from the deck, how it lands with you, how you've found it useful. That deck is one of many examples of just how I'm oriented in my life. I believe that a lot of labor can be labors of love. I care deeply about how people live. I care about the kind of societies that we create and sustain and improve upon. I care about the complexity and depth, and I care about the kinds of questions that we ask, because I wholeheartedly believe that they set the tone for how we live. As an individual that grew up in a family like mine, I wanted to be oriented in a different way, whether you are reflecting as an individual, as a member of a 2-person relationship of any kind, platonic, familial, romantic, whatever, whether you're talking as a broader family, a broader community. The way that we're oriented toward ourselves, our socialization, our values, our desires are key when it comes to how we get to live, how long we get to live, and the reasons that undergird all that stuff. Again, one of the things that you mentioned in my bio was that work that I did with Tufts, mapping 4 centuries of history. When you are living in a place like New England, and you can walk past a house that was erected in 1683 in Cambridge, that shifted my orientation toward time. What might it look like for me to help, as an individual, for me to help turn the tide during a cultural moment like this one, when we're surrounded by all these wild feats of engineering and technology, but we claim to not be able to know how to talk to each other. And I see proof of our ability to gather information, discern, weigh, and implement change based on our desires and our values, whether they are stated values or the values that we hold in actuality. And I realized that when it comes to a Gemini sun with a Scorpio moon, some of the best stuff I have to offer the world is my questions. Who are we? What does it mean that we're here? What might a fruitful, meaningful, robust life look like, even in a cultural moment like this one? What lessons does history have for us? And on and on and on. I'll stop there for now.
I think that's such an important point. And with regards to like the personal, professional development world, the questions are not that good historically in this line of work. The depth of reflection is not that profound. And the lenses are pretty like narrow. And I don't think, hey, Maureen, Scorpio moons unite. Wonderful. We've got some Scorpio moons in the house. So I as someone who trained to be a sociologist, I appreciate that, because the questions you ask mean everything, right? It's the whole framing. Can you share with us a little bit about like what your own reflective practice looks like? Like, I'm curious, do you use your cards? Like, what does that look like?
Well, let's see. I'm happy to share. I'm like, the Scorpio moon and Pluto in me is like, wait, my process. But no, so yes, I do go to my own cards, and I find that in any given moment, the right card pops up for me. Like, for example, I just moved back home to Chicago and who knows how long, everything's up in the air. And I had a straggler card, and so I just quickly tucked it into my purse as I was preparing for my flight into Midway. And when I opened up my purse, I realized that it's the card that asks, what can rest offer you that productivity cannot? And I'm in a season of rest, extended rest, which tends to make me a bit uncomfortable because I've had to be a go-getter. I've had to solve my own problems and find language for my discomfort, or sort of stoke my own fire so I can maintain enough passion to be invested in a growing process. And so, yes, I do use my cards. My cards use me. The first time my deck worked on me was when my deck had multiple iterations before I landed on the 72. I find that I interact with them depending on what I need in a given moment. I was telling some buddies a couple months back that some of my cards do speak to cards from tarot decks. That prompt that inquires about what rest might be able to offer us that productivity cannot. Not just that productivity doesn't, that productivity won't, that productivity cannot. There are things, and all my Capricorn placements are screaming and gnashing their teeth, but there are some things that productivity cannot provide you. And I had to come to terms with that. That card, that my prompt is tethered to the 4 of Swords in the tarot deck. The one where we have the I think we have 3 swords in one way and another that's horizontal. It's almost like the crypt is saying, like, lie down. American who's been socialized to want what she wants when she wants it, who hasn't been socialized in a family or a society outside of one primary person, but it language about stewardship, discernment, humane application of knowledge, where you're not using your intellect to beat somebody over the head like a cudgel because you want to appear a certain way. And I've been guilty of that too. But yeah, that's part of my reflection practice. Sometimes different cards speak to each other. And if I juxtapose them, I get to ask myself the question, well, what does this card know that the other one doesn't? Maybe that first card inquiring about rest and productivity is sitting next to the card that reads, what inhibits innovation? Should anything inhibit it? If I'm a C-level, C-suite person and I'm fancy and I'm cool, how might I move differently if I'm oriented toward my work in a more humane way, or if I'm consciously aware of all the folks that I'm tethered to and all the folks that I might be accountable to? Because just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so, those are some of the ways that my own deck pops up in my life.
It's funny you said that about, so I actually pulled out a couple of my favorite cards so I could share with you like my prompts, and I get the same ones as I pull the same cards all the time. And I shuffle, so I don't know what it's about, but one of the most common ones, and actually my favorite one, maybe that's why I get it, is to whom are you tethered and to whom are you accountable? That's one of my favorite cards, and it's the one that pops out like almost every time I sit down. That one comes out to me, and I really like to reflect on that. There's something about that question that I think a lot of like personal professional development reflection doesn't inquire, which is like, what do we owe? What do we owe? Broadly speaking. And so just because you can doesn't mean you should. Oh, there's some comments here. We've got a couple of Scorpio moons, Jen and Maureen, both social workers. I'll let you discuss that amongst yourselves. All friends of mine. So there's a pattern here. Hey, Tina, nice to have you here. So one of the reasons it's so interesting that you said they relate to tarot cards, because I just want to show, and there's a digital version in the comments that people can access, but just want to show like they're simple, they're text-based. I like them because they're so literal, without like the tarot cards can be overwhelming to me visually. And I like just the directness here. Were there other inspirations for some of the questions here?
Oh, for sure. Let me see. Well, my own past moral failings and all the things that I currently contend with. I wrote a LinkedIn article about some of the heavy structure that I'd be happy to, actually forgot to provide this link. But I will share about, let's see. Oh no, sorry about that. Uh-oh.
You may not be able to post can you post the link? Okay. Oh, you sent it to me. Okay. I will do a roundup so that everything is included here.
Why, thank you.
Yes.
But yeah, there were other inspirations. I'm constantly thinking about like the multifaceted nature of our identities. So I'm not just, an only child or someone with my experiences. I'm also a cultural beneficiary, cultural actor, cultural benefactor. Even if I never choose to have children of my own, there's, in a very real sense, I have inherited a world. I constantly contend with the society that we've collectively engineered. It's constantly working on me. So many of my values are directly informed by my socialization, both good and bad. And my own natural personality traits help me sort of shift and identify where I want to grow and why. But I'm constantly thinking about my place in history and what I inherited and why I rage at the things that I rage at. What parts of that rage are holy and necessary, and what undergirds that rage. One of the ways that I frame the deck is, for example, my idea of love. Of course, I can have self-love, that's a healthy, natural extension of like my self-preservation instinct. I feed myself, I bathe myself, I take care of myself, I tend to myself because I want myself to thrive and I affirm my existence and I want to endure, blah, blah, blah. But I grew up in a Christian church. Don't worry, I won't preach. But as I was growing up, one of the things I took note of was that so much of the motivation was like vertical. It's always like an upturned face and God dangles us over a fire. And it's like, well, what about the horizontal shit? Like, what about the space between people? What about the moral imperatives and social responsibilities that force us to sort of till the ground in between us? If I've been socialized to think certain ways about entire demographics of people, that affects everything from my sense of justice and the language that I have for it to what I think people deserve and why. When I think about how easy it can be and how easy it has been for me, and will continue to be at times because I'm human, how easy it is to sort of slip into a frame of mind and just keep going with it without expansion. It kind of blows my mind. Like, I take it outside of that one-to-one person thing, and I'm like, okay, well, how might I be inclined to show up in my community differently if everyone's child is of course a person in their own right, but in the language of astrology, right? Like, isn't the 11th house the house of other people's children? Like, am I not called to care about the quality of your life? Am I more or less likely to vote for someone or support policies that, you know, increase the level of poisonous material in our dirt, right? Like, if I care about your children, I'm less inclined to be okay with lead paint. Like, I want some higher standards for how we live because I have a greater understanding of what's at stake. And that's because I'm deeply invested in recognizing your humanity, honoring your dignity, and doing my part to help engineer a world that's worthy of all of us. I think these last 2 years, and I can even tell from how I'm answering questions these days that the last 2 years have been working on me. I'm tired of feeling this crunch. I'm hungry for expansion and all the ways that we can be benevolent toward each other. I don't mean that in a Pollyanna way. There are ways to be benevolent that require you to roll up your sleeves and do something. I'll stop there because I don't want to preach or get very political, but like, that's the bones of it. I think that the way that we are often forced to live, especially here in the United States, doesn't fully account for who we are as people who inherited a world, are acting on it, and will pass one down. I struggle with the fact that this is what we've created, knowing that we have to live here or attempt to live here. So yeah, all of that is in the work.
Yeah. I struggle with a lot of that too. And when I think about my own like behavior and relationship with work, I think when the pandemic started, I was like, at least I have work to focus on. Like, for 6 to 8 hours a day, I don't have to watch the news or wonder what's happening. I could, like, you know, really put some walls up. But that was like designed and intended to be a short-term strategy. And the like you said, like the crunch, the pushing through it, the having to show up day after day and function as a professional. I'm going to use air quotes for that because I think that's a loaded term, but like, show up in a professional capacity with so much of our social infrastructure, like, clearly falling apart, right? In catastrophic ways. I felt that too. I feel like there was some level of this people could tolerate, and we've far exceeded that. And there isn't the bandwidth in our economic system really to like accommodate for where people are at. And something I think about a little bit, I know you didn't want to get political or preachy, but we'll just go there, is like, you know, I've never seen a culture so oriented around work in the professionalization. And people who, I often think when I hear of things of like, people don't want to work, I just have to remember, like, that's a bananas thing for me to hear, because people pay me money to work. You know, there's like a whole cottage industry of professionals who help people enter and engage with and pursue their careers. So that's always a funny, strange thing to hear. But what I really think is like, that's been so diminished in this process, is like people's willingness to, you know, take out tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars a loan, pursue work at any cost, even make a lot of money or maximize their earnings. The desire and appetite for that, I've seen, has just been greatly reduced. And I know I work with kind of specific people, but I think when we see a lot of people quitting their job, that's partly what it is that people, the crunch is, I think, something a lot of people are feeling. There's just limits to how much you can really reasonably ignore, even unreasonably ignore, I think.
Yeah. I feel like there's an inextinguishable spark inside of people to want to thrive. And I think that even if our connection to that is incredibly muddied because of the kinds of families and societies that we're coming up in, I feel like even if it sits beyond words, it's somewhere in our bodies, in our intuition, we know what we're hungry for. We know that a world, a society that has been engineered this way, we know that it can't give us what we need. Well, I won't speak in such broad terms, but what I've found incredibly heartening about the public's response to my deck is that I didn't realize that so many people were hungry for the right questions to ask, right? Like again, Gemini sun, Scorpio moon, I am made of questions. That's why I don't have any pronouns up. I am all questions. I have no gender. I am 27 questions. And that's part of why I believe what I believe about that crunch bit. Like all of us have Scorpio energy in our charts, right? We have an impulse, an instinct to dig and inquire and wonder and, and ascertain what matters to us and why. I think that if anything, a global pandemic that's transmittable in the ways that it's transmittable, it forces a lot of folks to contend with what matters. Oof, yeah.
This reminds me, as you say, everyone has Scorpio in their chart. Millennials have Pluto in Scorpio, right? That's actually a shared it's a shared placement. Yeah. So actually, this leads me to my next question, which is like, what role does astrology play in your reflective practice? Because I feel like it's important to you.
It definitely helps. It provides more language for how people are oriented and how they show up in the world. I like to think that I'm a student of life. I'm always observing. And even in my rougher moments, I was trying to integrate as much information as possible because I was trying to keep my head above water. But as I learned more and more about it, I mean, I would encourage anyone to sort of broaden scope and inquire about why people gravitate towards certain systems of thought, even if it's just to have more language for what might motivate people, or so that you can then reflect on what motivates you. But I say all this to say that, in short, learning more deeply about astrology not only gave me more vocabulary for folks and their natural inclinations and how they might move, but also it helped me be more humble and compassionate. When I think about the fact that everyone is a combination of these complex thoughts, feelings, ways of moving through the world and passions. As someone who sort of, after they left the church, started going to museums on Sundays because museums became a house of worship. If I can see the reverence in what people create, why wouldn't I then see the reverence in the people that do the creating? Why wouldn't I marvel at my Capricorn sun friend who rode his bike across the country, right? If that's not Saturn energy embodied, I don't know what it is. But when I say that it makes me humble, it's just humble and compassion. It's like everyone has a Chiron placement, right? Everyone has a cosmic wound. And who am I to move through the world as if my wound is the only one that matters, right? It makes me, astrology learning about it, inclined me to be more humble and compassionate because everyone has, Pluto mowing through the town and separating the wheat from the chaff and figuring out what needs to be there and what doesn't. Even if a surgery is necessary, it can still overhaul your body, right? Everyone has Saturn in some part of their chart working on forcing them to raise their standards, develop discipline and temerity by way of limitation, restraint, delays, and trouble. Like that, if that's not a source of compassion, I don't know what is. And it just, I think that it is really interesting and delightful to know that whether it's a religion or a system of thought like astrology or the Enneagram, that human beings, like other animals, have this natural impulse to wonder, to inquire, to wrap language around their experiences. And I think that it's a wonderful way to learn about myself, the world, and other people.
I really love thinking of it as like a source of compassion for others. I get very analytical about it, and I'm like, this person's acting crazy. Let me.
I hear you. I hear you.
That's good. I'm going to start thinking of it this way. I love Maureen's comment here. Living the questions is where I exist. I feel like I heard that a little bit in what you were saying there, like really honoring those questions. So I feel like I'm curious. This isn't a process I'd want to rush necessarily, but like when people are thinking about turning their reflection practice and insights into action, like translating that into some change in their own life, do you have any thoughts on how to start that process, which I think can feel really overwhelming for people?
Oh, for sure. I know that my starting point might not work for everyone. That said, I I wholeheartedly believe that thinking about it as an orientation toward yourself, the way you move through the world, and that includes how you treat other people. I think that starting there is key, because I'm gonna sit here and tell you, I don't think that the starting point is paying $699 for, I don't know, for uh, like I would never tell someone, I think you should start with my imposter syndrome workshop for only $799. I mean, it's great to like provide people with access to content and frameworks that enable them to move their minds. But honestly, now that I'm spending a lot more time with my mother, and other people can be a very clean mirror. I am grateful for the fact that, and this is not a mama joke, but I'm grateful for the fact that my primary caregiver is now right near me after I've lived 1,000 miles away for the last 13 years. Now that I'm up close and personal again, I get to see where so much of my stuff comes from, good and bad. I get to have a front row seat when it comes to my own psyche. And that means that like when I, in a fit of frustration because because a pitch that I gave to a local store in Chicago didn't get back to me, that doesn't mean that I get to be short or harsh with my mother when she asks me if I want more hot water for tea. Even that self-reflection practice forcing me to really look at the way I'm oriented toward this other human being. It doesn't matter that how do I say this? It doesn't matter that so many of my own behaviors have their roots in how I was raised. I am still ultimately responsible for how I show up in the world. No one else is in the driver's seat but me. And so I would never say to someone who's like a parent with 5 children, who's working 3 different part-time jobs, buy this thing or talk to these people and play patty cake with these 9 C-suite executives. It's like, no, like really think, how am I showing up in my relationship with my children? Even if I don't take the time to write in a journal every day, am I clocking my emotions as I go through the day? This person that I've chosen to partner with, have I truly considered the quality of life that any people we might create have, right? That's an act of benevolence too. Having like the care, compassion, and the foresight to think of anyone you might create as a person in their own right, with their own experiences, who are going to have varying degrees of comfort with different things. Like, how do I show up in the world? It's on me to discern where that stuff comes from, what I think I'm getting out of it. I honestly believe that the starting point is observation. And I understand that that requires courage, but courage is free.
I'm going to write that down real quick. Courage is free. I like that sort of it sounds like your place for action happens in a very like internal place first, where you become like, you generate greater self-awareness, right? That allows you to sort of watch your own actions and identify, we'll say, room for improvement, areas to celebrate. And that may not work for everyone, but that's also such a great entry point for so many people, because you can pick one area of your life to do this in, right? It doesn't have to be like tackling all the pillars here. You can think about whether it's your close relationships or work, like how are you showing up, and really paying greater attention to that, and like checking, like, is this how I want to be showing up? What else is possible here?
Yes, indeed. And also in my own opinion, from my own life, it's an act of rebellion. We have been forced to live under this crunch as a result of policy and individual choices that we've made. We have engineered our misfortune, and it has enraged me that I've been so vulnerable to external factors. And so being able to turn inward, metaphorically speaking, stand on my own 2 feet and say, regardless of what's going on around me, what qualities, what attributes, what abilities do I embody? How do I move through the world as a force that's distinct from everyone and everything around me? Even though I'm tethered, even though I'm deeply invested in people's flourishing in healthy ways, even still, there is a facet of who I am. I mean, talking astrology, right? We all have like Uranus somewhere, right? Going around whatever on its axis, doing its own thing. We have language for our distinct selves. And I think that in a place where, and again, I'm in Chicago, I grew up in the United States, my family's been here a few centuries. We are chatting in a country where, you're often told, if you don't do X, then this means X. It's just like, what does it mean that how do I say this? That I'm constantly being like crushed under the weight of societal expectations or systems of oppression? How much have I had to abandon as a result of it just not being tenable in a society like this one? I've abandoned a lot of joy by force, out of duty. What does it mean for me to make my joy an act of rebellion? What does it mean for me to go into my own mind, for me to understand why I go after what I go after? If I'm so hungry for the perfect resume like I was for ages, well, it was because I felt really put upon, invaded, and weak. I survived a lot. And so I thought that the answer was for me to, okay, well, I'll get to this institution, I'll create this thing, I'll prove that I have temerity and courage and strength and that I'm enduring. And that's all well and good. It helped me to really value being a person of integrity and trying to get there. It's really nice to have a sort of North Star to guide you, especially in a very confusing society. But yeah, it's not lost on me that we live in a society that's constantly trying to take us out of ourselves so that it can sell us admission back in. It's like,
Yes.
who told you that you abandoned post? You're right. You're right where you're supposed to be. Why do we allow so much of how we're forced to live to take us out of ourselves? I think that it's not just annoying and infuriating. I think it's beneath our dignity. Yeah, maybe it's the only child in me, but I don't want to start outside myself. That pulls on my religious trauma. What does it mean for me to be encouraged to have an upturned face and to pray to something outside of myself, when if I have a divine spark inside of me, isn't it holy for me to implement that? Isn't it righteous for me to use my intellect and my affection and my temerity and diligence to help preserve Eden, to borrow religious language, to borrow Christian language? Yeah, there's something inextinguishable that I like to honor, and that's inside. But I get if other things work for other people. Maybe you're deeply motivated by love and your strong desire to create a strong foundation for other people plays a part. I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, separating ourselves to sell us admission back in is how there's a lot of institutions that probably applies to. Yeah.
Yes.
So when I hear you talk about your own insights and how you use your awareness to observe your behavior, like what comes up for me, like I can almost hear the voice of someone being like, well, I'm I'm afraid, or like, what if you get pushback, or what if this, you know, honoring your own sense of integrity or ensuring your own dignity, what if there's a cost to that? And I always say there's always a cost to it. There's never not a cost. I tend to be like extremely strong-willed. So like I tend to be someone who's willing to bear the cost. Like what would your advice be to someone who, you know, for whom courage doesn't feel free, you know, where it feels, you know, feels very far away?
Oh yeah. I'm gonna be real with you. How do I say this? I was gonna say I was born in a van down by the river. No, I have quite a story, and I'll say this: courage did not always feel free to me. It often felt like it was wrung out of me, coerced out of me, dragged out of me. I, like many people, I imagine, I've been forced to contend with some pretty tough situations, and so I have incredible compassion and empathy for somebody who's in that spot right now. I will say, however, that, and I say this with all of the love and respect that I have in my heart. And when I say love, I mean that on an individual and like an agape love for the world sense. The cost of not digging is higher. I'm gonna be real with you. Like the last 2 years kind of slowed me down. That's the Taurus rising in me. I'm like, I'm comfortable. I don't have to go nowhere. I can have meetings in my sweatpants. I can have all my groceries delivered. I never have to get up again. What is a bra? What is an underwire? But I'm gonna be real with you. When I got to my mama's place and I saw how we both had more gray hairs framing our faces, right? One of my first thoughts, against Scorpio moon and Pluto, prepare yourself because you know it's dark. My first thought was, wow, we have more years behind us than we have in front of us. And that's just the reality of things. My mama and I, we are working through some family stuff, and it's necessary. Again, she's a very clean mirror for me. She's a person in her own right, of course, and I'm a very clean mirror for her. But the fact is, it's like the two of us, she's a Capricorn moon. And so it's like when you want to really do some work, you give that job to a Capricorn moon and a Scorpio moon. We have decided as a two-person family to really look at our individual and in our individual lives and our relationship as a mother and daughter. We've decided to dig in our heels and do the necessary work, because we know, and that means asking the hard questions, asking my mother, why did you make certain choices that so negatively impacted my life? And when I realized that her choices were directly impacted by her parents' choices, and I had language for it, I had more capacity for compassion. I think it's necessary because, like, I'm constantly telling my mother, and I tell her this because I love her. Again, and Scorpio moon love is a little different. I basically said to her, like, I love you so much. I won't let us die this way. And if I won't let us die this way, I'm damn sure not going to let us live this way. That's why my card deck is why I feel like it's a labor of love. I don't want us living this way. I've seen the relief wash over people when they have words for why they feel how they feel, or why they think what they think. And whether that popped up in the imposter syndrome workshops, which, let's be real, are really about power, agency, one's comfort level as they occupy a space that they've been socialized to believe they don't deserve to be in. Like, I might not go to church anymore, but I show up in the world as if I can individually play a role in collectively shifting things. It's important to do this digging. It's important that you pay the admissions price of that is courage, even because it doesn't feel free. Because at least in my experience, after a while, once you start to exhibit that courage, you realize it's like, sure, is there resistance? Yes, but this my will is an extension of my agency, right? It is life affirming. It is dignity affirming to move through the world as if you're a contender like everyone else. Not that you have to be in competition with others. Again, I have a North Node in Aries, but no other places. I'm like, competition. I'm an only child. Who's my competition? But it's really like there's the work can transform you.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want to be the healthiest, most well-adjusted, most self-actualized version of themselves? The price for not doing it is far higher, in my opinion. And we don't have to live that way, and we don't deserve to live that way.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing that. I admire the work you and your mom are doing towards your relationship. That's really special, actually. So all that Capricorn and Scorpio moon energy being channeled in the best possible way. That's phenomenal.
Oh, and I got her permission to talk about these things. I always require consent before sharing things. Yes, indeed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rayshauna, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. Is it okay with you if I share a couple, as we're wrapping up, just a couple of my favorite cards with people who are listening?
Yeah,
I pulled a few, and it's funny because I do get the same ones over and over again, but I wanted to share with you which ones. So I said that to whom are you tethered, to whom are you accountable? That's one of my favorites. And I felt like this follows up what you said. What does it mean to be a good steward of one's own power? I also think all my work is about power. So I really like talking about that with people. What did you inherit that you refuse to pass on? And what kinds of structure facilitate your freedom, creativity, and agency? I really like this one too. So I just want to thank you for these, because these are the ones that constantly jump out and I like them so much. And every once in a while, I really resist a lot of inner child stuff, but the newborn one pops out and I'm like, dang, I got to answer this question today. So thank you for those tougher questions too. Because there's some stuff that I would rather not spend a lot of time in, but they come up frequently as well. So so you provided some links, and I'll make sure that we share them. But for people who might, and I really recommend, let me make sure I get it in the camera here, the Modus Operandi Deck, where can people get their own, and where can people learn more about you if they want to hear from you and hear about your work?
Oh, sure thing. Well, let's see. My cards are available on my website. It's theideologue.info, THEIDEOLOGUE.info. And so it's just under the store tab. I also have an Etsy shop. On Twitter and Instagram, I'm Rayshauna Capri. I'll be making both digital versions available of my deck for free to folks that sign up for my newsletter. They'll be both in card form that can be cut out, but also list form. They're available physically, but I understand that a lot of folks are in a financial pinch. And when I tell you, I walk the streets of Boston and Chicago leaving cards at bus stations. I'm like, listen, I'm emailing public schools and giving people the digital versions because I care that folks have the opportunity to use them to reflect. If you email me, send me a form submission or something, I'll email you back directly. But yeah, I'll be making both available via email later on tonight.
Wonderful. And I just want to say it's so generous of you to share the digital versions of the deck. But when you do order your own, it is the most beautifully packaged, sweet thing. So if you're ready to splurge a little bit, I think it's very well worth it. When I finally got mine, I was so excited. I ran down the stairs. I was so excited when it came. I think I still have my unboxing video on Instagram. So just so proud of you, because I knew that was a long time coming, and it was fun to finally have it happen. I'm sure it was fun for you to finally have it happen as well.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yes. The entrepreneurial journey of, I have an idea, I'm implementing the idea. No, I'm done with the idea. I'm releasing it to the world. So I'm very familiar with that. Thank you so much, Rayshauna. Thanks, Maureen. Hopefully we answered your question. Thanks to everyone who joined us live today. And I will be sharing the replay, so feel free to give this a share. If you want to hear more about our upcoming Reimagining Ambition speakers, join our mailing list. You can do so at workwonderscareers.com/social. But I hope the rest of you enjoy your week. I hope you grab one of these decks for your own practice. And we'll see you in a couple weeks at our next round. Thanks so much, Rayshauna.
Thank you for having me.